Good evening, welcome. My name is Chanel Hasten. I am the Director of Outreach and Community Relations for the Elakha Alliance, and we're so pleased to have you join us tonight on this lovely May 3rd evening. Today we're going to be discussing latest updates on sea otter reintroduction here in Oregon, which is going to be full of lots of wonderful new information. And also, if you've never heard of us before, hopefully you'll be very well versed at the end of this presentation. So my intro is going to be a little shorter because Bob is obviously going to be speaking about us. So keep that in mind. Our mission is to restore a healthy population of sea otters back on the Oregon coast, and in the process help make our Oregon marine ecosystems more robust and resilient, since sea otters are a keystone species. I'm sure you'll learn more about that from Bob in a little bit. And so I have some really exciting updates to share and events coming up in the next several months. So tomorrow starts our Sea Otter Mother's Day giveaway. So if you're signed up on our RAF newsletter and follow us on social media, you'll see this come out tomorrow. So you're getting a sneak peek. But Marina Larson is a student at OSU and also the daughter of Sean Larson, who is the curator of conservation at the Seattle Aquarium. And I met her recently at a conference, and she said she was painting this beautiful kelp forest scene and that she wanted to donate it to us so we could fundraise with it. So if you donate $50 in increments of $50, you'll be entered to win this beautiful painting. And so we're trying to raise $5,000 this week for Mother's Day celebration. So she's not finished completely yet, so that is not a complete photo, but she will be in the next several weeks. So we would love for you to donate, and also hopefully you can win this beautiful one-of-a-kind art piece. And she has a couple sea otters in there too, if you can see. Myself and Peter Hatch, our board member, will be speaking at OSU at the Native American Cultural Center on May 17th from 12 to 1:50 p.m. You are invited to come listen to us. We'll be talking about the cultural significance of sea otters. And then on June 21st, a Tuesday at 7 p.m., we will be the headliners at the OMSI Science Pub Talk here in Portland, discussing sea otters, fancy that. And that will be at the McMenamins Kennedy School Theater, and tickets will go on sale for that soon on the OMSI website. We are also looking for an executive director, our first one ever. So if you know anyone who might be an amazing person to steer us in the right direction over the next several years for sea otter reintroduction, please check out our website. The job information is posted on there. And also, if you just want to email me personally, my email is right there as well, chanel@elakha-alliance.org. We also have two really amazing summer tribal youth internships available for college students here in Oregon. Applications will close May 23rd. So that information can also be found on our website, or you can send me an email as well. Let's see, I think Bob's here. Let me make him a host. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. Okay, he's on. Excellent. And let's see. So if you're not already subscribed to our email newsletter, we send it out once a month so you can stay on top of everything that we're doing. You can do that via our website, elakha-alliance.org. And also, please do follow us on all our social media channels, and our YouTube channel. It has a plethora of amazing videos, which this one will live on for the rest of eternity after today. So be sure to subscribe on there after this. And Bob, welcome, Bob. So Bob Bailey is our board president for the Elakha Alliance. He spent nearly 40 years in coastal and ocean planning and management for the state of Oregon. He also served as city commissioner for the city of Oregon City, a member of the City of Salem Budget Committee, and chair of the Oregon Wave Energy Trust. He is also very musically talented. and many other things. But without further ado, Bob, welcome. Glad you got on. Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh my God. Technology, man. It's you bump the wrong button and your whole world falls apart. So thanks for covering for me. And thank you everybody for joining us tonight. All 40 some of us in here in this little private room. I must say that it's at least 5 o'clock someplace. So I have my Pelican India Pale Ale, and we could actually treat this as a pub talk. And every time I mention the word Elakha Alliance, you get to take a drink. So we'll see how long.
I got my wine.
All right.
Cheers.
Well, thank you, everybody. Sorry for the delay here. I'm going to share my screen.
Now, while Bob's doing that, I also always forget to mention to use the Q&A feature or a chat box. If you have any questions that pop up while Bob is presenting, please do so there. Thank you.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of questions. You know, this is like the Elakha Alliance kind of started like the Big Bang, and suddenly we've got this universe that's just expanding into all kinds of directions. And you can still see some of the heat glow from the initial bang, but there's lots of new stars out there and constellations. So there's a lot to report on what's going on, and I'm probably not going to cover everything that each of you wants to know. So I'll do my best. There'll be some little bunny trails we'll go down, but I'm going to try to give you an overall view of kind of where we are in trying to bring sea otters back to Oregon, because this has turned into a big deal. And I must say, a very fun and engaging and entirely worthwhile big deal. So let's get started here. Just a little refresher, the Elakha Alliance was conceived really more than 20 years ago by David Hatch, who at the time was a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. And I got to know Dave a little bit. Long story, but suffice to say, we formally organized as a nonprofit in 2018. And then very quickly jumped into business of making this thing work. We adopted a strategic plan in 2019, and I will refer to that several times during this talk because it guides everything we do. And we actually received our 501c3 status in April of 2020. So we're official. Again, why are we doing this? And it's because sea otters are a keystone species, and they've been missing here for more than a century. No other animal has as profound an effect on the nearshore marine ecosystem as a sea otter. It's unbelievable the influence that they have, both in the nearshore and in estuarine ecosystems, we're learning too. And the consequences of that absence for more than 100 years was neither appreciated nor understood until relatively recently. But as the current loss of kelp beds and the spread of urchin barrens attests, their absence is really a crucial missing piece of our ecosystem. Likewise, Oregon's coastal tribes have lost a key cultural connection to sea otters. And in addition, we're doing this because sea otters as a species need additional population centers and genetic mixing. So here's the short story. With sea otters, here's what you get. You get a kelp forest with all kinds of marine life and productivity that feeds the entire nearshore ecosystem. Without sea otters, you get an urchin barren where sunlight penetrates straight to the bottom, the water heats up, there's no productivity, and you don't get all those benefits. So that's the long story short. So our mission that we adopted as part of our strategic plan in 2019 is to restore this healthy population of sea otters to the Oregon coast, and in the process make Oregon's marine ecosystem more robust and resilient. Yes, these things are cute and fuzzy, but we're doing it for the ecosystem and for the cultural connection. So we've got 3 strategic objectives, you might say goals. The first is to assess the scientific and economic feasibility of restoring sea otters. The second is to help the region reach consensus on restoration, and that means public support. And then if we can achieve those two things, which I believe we can and will, then we will proceed with restoration in carefully chosen places. We're not just going to dump sea otters out everywhere and anywhere, but we're going to pick our spots and be strategic about it. So how do we get from a mission statement to actually animals in the water? Well, that's the trick. That's it's like planning a journey from A to B, and you don't really know exactly what's going to be involved in the journey, but there's a lot of steps. So to guide ourselves, we do have those two strategic objectives: to get the science right and achieve consensus. And then at some point, we're going to make a decision to proceed, and that will then trigger a lot more work and planning. So let's get the science right. The feasibility study that we commissioned back in 2019 was, the draft was actually published in late August of 2021, last summer. It sat out there for 3 months, and I know many of you had a chance to read it thoroughly and digest every little bit of it. And if you didn't do that, then you probably took advantage of the summaries that were online and still are posted on our website. The final document, after comments were received, was published on our website in January of 2022. And I must say, right now we are working with a woman to prepare this document for actual publication, which includes formatting and making sure the fonts are right and the spacing and graphics are clear. And then we're also going to do a public-facing summary in a much more hyperlinked environment for posting on our website, and then a couple of short summary pieces that we can use as well. So the feasibility study is really an amazing document. There's 10 basic chapters that cover really the gamut of everything you need to know about restoring sea otters to the Oregon coast and whether it's feasible or not. These are just a quick glimpse of the chapters with their little icons. The appendix is really, in some respects, where the fun begins. And I'll get to that in a second. So the bottom line is that the feasibility study found that reintroductions are, in fact, a successful conservation tool. Reintroducing them to Oregon is likely to succeed if we do it right. Estuaries might be an important reintroduction environment, and that is not something that we anticipated going into the study. And that return of sea otters will have many direct and indirect effects. Yeah, we know that. And this confirmed it. And that there are a number of social, economic factors and regulatory issues that must be considered. We're not just introducing these things into a pristine marine environment or into a coast that's not already occupied. So there are a number of social and economic, logistical, regulatory, and health and welfare considerations we'll have to consider. But the bottom line is that it's likely to succeed. As I said, the fun begins in some ways with this sea otter population model that's in the appendix. And if you go online, and I encourage you to go online and look up this feasibility study, you can get to the appendix and get this little population model. And what you'll find, and you don't have to know the math, although there is real math behind this thing, and it's pretty astounding. This model predicts what the population density will be after the number of years that the user specifies, or the years it will take to reach carrying capacity at various areas on the coast. It's based on real world data from previous translocations and how those populations behaved over time. It's based on the ecological and life history characteristics of sea otters and the physical and biological conditions of 41 segments of the Oregon nearshore and estuaries. You can go in and make a number of choices about how you want to introduce sea otters, and then run the model for X number of years. So here's what it looks like when you go to that site. You'll see the coast is divided up into all these little segments, and behind each of these segments is a variety of data themes about habitat suitability, depth, that kind of thing. And then over on the left-hand side, you can select a number of parameters to introduce your sea otters. If you do that, For instance, if you said at some area that you wanted to introduce 40 animals, and this is kind of a little model, you'll notice that the population will decline over time, and then it will eventually begin to rise. And what you see here, if the model is run 500 or 1,000 times, you'll get a confidence interval of pretty much what you might expect to happen, but there will be some uncertainties of either higher or lower numbers. And that over time, say in this case, 25 years, you'll end up with 70 animals where you started with 40. Likewise, the model will show you a map of the Oregon coast with a projection of where these otters are most likely to be from the point that you introduce them. We use the model to run the exact same scenario of 100 animals, 70 for the first year, and then 3 every year for 10 years. We ran that for all segments on the coast and ended up with, these are the areas that appear to be most beneficial or productive for sea otters. As you might expect, the Southern Oregon coast, the Redfish Rocks, Rogue Reef, Cape Blanco, Cape Arago areas, and then surprisingly, Tillamook Bay. And one of the reasons for Tillamook Bay is the amount of shellfish in the bay. So to aid in our discussions and eventual work with an economic analysis, we chose 4 population scenario sites and ran populations to see what would happen if we were to introduce, to try to achieve enough animals to achieve 200 animals in these areas after 25 years. We picked this Cape Arago area, the Humbug, Port Orford area, Rogue Reef, Gold Beach, and then further up the coast, Yaquina Bay and Otter Rock. And what we learned in this scenario development was that if you want to end up over here on the right with 200 animals after the end of 25 years, you need to, at least for Yaquina Bay, you need to start with 370 animals, and in Humbug, you need to start with 255. So you'll see and the timelines here is kind of squished more than it was in the original diagram I showed you. But you'll see that there's actually a significant loss of animals right off the bat because there is always a loss through emigration and mortality before the population finally gains hold and eventually recovers to some point. The bottom line of this, the lesson from all of this, is that even if we introduced many hundreds of animals in one or more places on the coast, it's going to be years before that population rebounds and takes hold back anywhere close to its original number. We're also doing an economic impact assessment. We received a final draft a couple of weeks ago, and we're still parsing through the technicalities of that and trying to, frankly, understand what it means and to get that smoothed out for public consumption. And the results vary by area as to what the impacts will be. So we need more close-up detailed analysis in many of these scenario areas. Overall, though, the report shows a net economic benefit to the Oregon coast, even if there will be some winners and some losers. Based on the science of the feasibility study, we're working towards several science deliverables right now. We've started to build a GIS assessments of various coastal regions with a focus on the South Coast. We want to show a whole range of factors that will influence where sea otters return and where some release sites will be. We want to understand better how sea otter habitat overlaps with shellfishery harvest areas, both sea urchins and Dungeness crab at a very fine-grained scale. We want to amend the Oregon Nearshore Conservation Strategy, which is a document gaining in importance for making funding decisions based on state funding through the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, as well as what we expect to be a windfall of funding coming from the federal government through the Renew America's Wildlife Act that looks like it's going to pass very soon. We're also getting ready to issue an RFP for pre and post-release monitoring and research so that we can do some planning for that. We're very interested in the blue carbon ecosystem services that returning otters to Oregon might provide, but we need to get our arms around that topic. And we thought the best way to do that is through a white paper. We need more research on the presence of sharks, great white sharks and broad-nosed sharks that can accidentally bite sea otters. And even though they're not preying on them, if they bite a sea otter, it's almost always fatal to the otter. We just got word yesterday that our funding proposal we have into the Oregon Conservation Recreation Fund has passed the first step of approval, and we're expecting that to be approved by August. A researcher at Oregon State, Taylor Chappell, and Sal Jorgensen down at UC Santa Cruz will be doing that work of tagging white sharks and broad-nosed sharks on the coast and monitoring their presence. This is some work that's never been done. We don't really know much about the distribution and abundance of sharks, but we think it's important to know before we go releasing sea otters into this environment. And then finally, we need to understand better the climate change impacts on potential translocation. Now it's time for a little drinky poo. All right. Okay, on the other strategic objective of achieving consensus, there's a lot of work going on here, and that's really, in many respects, Chanel's area of expertise, the outreach and information communication that she's been doing. We're starting to focus a lot of this, but not all, but a lot of our outreach efforts on the Southern Oregon coast, because as the feasibility study points out, this is the area where we can expect the best sea otter habitat to exist. We recently hired Frank Burris as our new South Coast liaison. Frank just retired from 20 plus years working for OSU Extension Sea Grant in Curry County, so he knows the territory. And as they used to say, you got to know the territory. So his job is to educate, advocate, listen to concerns, learn the details, collaborate, work with the Oregon Kelp Alliance that's working on some kelp restoration initiatives, and connect with other local conservation work in the area. So Frank's got a big job, but we think he's the right guy to do it. Chanel's going to continue, as she showed you a little earlier, her social media work. That's really been an amazing part of the growth of us as an organization. It's really helped with our funding. I would encourage you, if you're watching this, to go to our website and sign up as a monthly donor. Even if it's just a little bit, that really adds up and helps a lot. Beyond that, keep tabs with us on all of these social media sites. Chanel does a great job of making sure that these are robustly populated, as they say. Our YouTube channel has 40-some videos of webinars and science symposium presentations that we've held. If you want to get the audio video lesson on sea otters and kelp and all kinds of related topics, you can do that here on our YouTube channel. You don't even have to read a book. It's been fun putting these together, and it's a great learning resource for you. I want to talk a little bit, though, about our partnerships and begin with our science team. This is something I haven't given enough credit to. And I want to go through the science team, the folks that put together this feasibility study and who have continued to be so informative and supportive and engaged with our work. It's really made a big difference to me personally, that these folks would put their professional names on the work that we've been doing, and to give us the kind of support and guidance that we need. So beginning with Jim Bodkin, who retired from USGS up in Alaska. He spent 30 years working on sea otters, worked on a number of translocations, studying population dynamics. Jim has been really helpful to us. Sean Larson, who Chanel mentioned a little bit ago, it's her daughter who is doing the painting for us. Sean has just been incredible from the get-go. She is a geneticist, a conservation curator at the Seattle Aquarium. She's really been so enthusiastic as a supporter for us and has been very helpful in providing the kind of background information and contacts that we need. Dr. Mike Murray, I've gotten to know. He's the chief veterinarian at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Great guy. He put together a fabulous chapter in the feasibility study, but has also provided a lot of interesting advice beyond that. So I appreciate his work and his engagement with our effort. Jan Hodder is an old friend who I recruited after she retired from the University of Oregon Institute of Marine Biology. She was really our local specialist to help these other science folks apply their information and knowledge to the Oregon coast. Jan has an extensive knowledge of Oregon coast marine biology and oceanography, and it was really great to have her on the team. I can't say enough about Jim Estes. Jim is the godfather of sea otter science. It was he who many years ago tumbled to the fact that sea otters are what was then a brand new term, a keystone species, and make all the difference. His initial findings from 1969, 70, that era, have been held up time and again by succeeding studies, and Jim is still in the game. Jim was a member of our science a feasibility study team, and I want to recommend his book, Serendipity. Anybody watching this podcast or this webinar, if you're this interested in sea otters, you owe it to yourself to go read Jim's book. You can order it online from your favorite source, and it's really an amazing look at the life of a scientist, but how science really works over the span of 50 to 60 years and over the geographic span that his work covered. So really excellent book. I would just note that Jim was badly injured in a car accident last summer. He's recovering well, but slowly, and we wish him all the best. And I just appreciate so much his participation in our work. And here's Dr. Tim Tinker. He was the lead principal author of the study, the guy that really built the sea otter population model. Tim has his fingerprints all over sea otter science for decades now, and is a great guy. He's offered his advice, his background, his work to us, and we wouldn't be where we are without Tim. It's just been really terrific to have him on board. I also want to mention some other partnerships with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Paul Henson, who's the Oregon State Supervisor, upper right there, is retiring soon, but it was Paul that I first met with when we first started out to decide whether to make the Elakha Alliance a real thing. And Paul, as it turns out, studied sea otters when he was getting his master's. And so he was a little enthused about it and has been a strong supporter behind the scenes in making this happen. Likewise, Michelle Zwartjes has just been fabulous to work with. She's the kind of woman who will answer text messages and emails on the weekends and evenings, and really has been engaged with us. And it was Paul and Michelle that helped provide the initial funding for our feasibility study and economic assessment that helped to launch this whole thing. And finally, Lillian Carswell, who is a longtime sea otter biologist in California, working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She spent 2 full hours with me on the phone when we first started this thing, talking me through what might be involved. And she's continued to be involved with this. So we couldn't ask for a better partner from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service than these folks. And I wish Paul all the best when he moves off into retirement, but we're going to keep him engaged in this somehow. Another important partnership we've got is through the Oregon Zoo. They've provided some amazing videos for us, as well as some funding through the Oregon Zoo Foundation. If you haven't had a chance to watch these 2 videos, you can find them on our YouTube channel. They're both about 5, 6, 7 minutes long, not very long at all. The first is on the cultural significance of Oregon sea otters. The second is on the ecological and economic importance of sea otters. And these 2 videos have helped us to spread our message both online and to potential funders and interested supporters in ways that words just sitting here like this cannot convey. So it's been just super to have the zoo step up and to offer these media as a part of this partnership. So just here's a quick collection of a whole range of the logos of a range of the partners that we've accumulated over the last several years. Coastal Indian tribes, of course, the Confederated Tribes of Kusla, Warumkwa, and Siuslaw, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, and the Coquel Indian tribes all have representatives on our board of directors. And we've gotten funding from them. We recently got some funding from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, but there's a whole range of partners in a variety of situations that are represented here by these logos. And that's been really the fun of this thing, is building an alliance, a true alliance of all of our partners. And one of the fun things about this little project we've got going is we get to do kind of what we want in a way. So we decided a year or so ago to do an otter themed beer challenge. And Chanel organized that thing, recruited what turned out to be 13 breweries, each of them challenged to use a malt called Maris Otter malt that's made in England, and use that to brew a beer that kind of reflected sea otters and benefited the marine ecosystem. We had a great event at OMSI in Portland back in March. A good time was had by all, and we had a lot of fun. We hit it just right. The governor had recently lifted the mask mandate, so it was a good evening and a lot of good beer. And I think we're going to do it again next year. So the Elakha Alliance is seeking its first executive director. I think Chanel mentioned that earlier. This is a big step for us. We need to do that. And our funding is in a situation where, yeah, we can do this now. And with the idea that the executive director will continue to raise money to keep the whole ship afloat. So as Chanel said, if you know somebody that might make a good director, send them our way. I want to acknowledge this little guy, this little ambassador sea otter that showed up over at Yaquina Head back around Thanksgiving of last year. He was there from off and on for maybe 2 weeks or more, and drew crowds like you wouldn't believe. It was really amazing to go over there and see just feel the excitement of people watching this thing in the water, and the kids and adults, and the cameras clicking and the telescopes were out. It was really, really heartening that there was so much public response for this little guy. Unfortunately, he succumbed to the bite of a shark and didn't make it. He was found on the beach alive, but eventually succumbed at the aquarium. So rest in peace, little ambassador. You are a glimpse of the future. And I want to say 2 condors flew in the wild today. They were released today, where they actually the door was opened, they stepped out, lifted their wings, and took off today down in Northern California, down in the Redwood country. And I want to give a huge shout out to the Yurok people and all of the many partners, including the Oregon Zoo, for returning these condors to the sky. The fellow on the right here, Chris West, is one of our advisory council members. Chris has been very instrumental in this whole project, but so have many people, including David Shepherdson, who is on our board of directors involved through the Oregon Zoo. This is a monumental event to release these condors and have them back in the sky. We may even see them out on the Southern Oregon coast one of these days. So it's a big step, and we draw a lot of inspiration from the effort it took to bring these birds back, the partnerships, the length of time, the sort of dedication to purpose that the Yurok people and the many partners showed in getting this job done. So congratulations to everybody. With that, I'm going to stop and I will take questions because I think that's probably a lot of pent up consumer demand out there. Thank you very much. All right, Chanel,
Nice job, Bob.
I'm going to take a drink here.
Go for it. We had a question come in that I answered via typing, but you can say it out loud since we are recording this. Betsy asked, will these be northern sea otters and where will you get them from?
Good question. They will probably be northern sea otters. They will probably come from Southeast Alaska because Southeast Alaska has a population of between 25 and 30,000 sea otters right now altogether. That's sea otter heaven up there. And so that's likely to be the area where we will get them, the bulk of the initial population. In addition, those animals are not listed on the threat as threatened or endangered, which makes the process a lot easier. So they'll probably come here. The unspoken question is, what about southern sea otter? Well, the answer is that Oregon, once upon a time, appears to have been a transition zone between northern and southern, A, and B, it doesn't make any difference. Those animals are entirely compatible. I talked to people like Sean Larson, and they're not sure that there should even be any kind of subspecies differentiation between them, since it's more just the morphological difference. But over time, we may want to supplement this population with animals from California as they are available from, say, the Monterey Bay surrogate pup rearing program, and those animals become available. We may want to introduce those animals, the southern sea otter, into a population that's up here in Oregon, and in that way help to facilitate the linkage, the genetic linkage that the sea otter conservation people are real concerned about. But the initial population will likely be from Alaska.
Oh, thank you. Nina says, I thought I recalled seeing a second otter being spotted off our coastline. Am I remembering correctly?
Could be.
There was one.
Yeah.
There was no follow-up.
Yeah. Typically what happens, or frequently what happens, is there will be a lone adolescent male sea otter detach from the population on the Olympic coast and drift southward, looking, as all young males do, or most young males, looking for a good time and adventure. So that's a fairly frequent thing. In fact, the Washington Department of Fish and Game and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service start their surveys, their annual surveys for the sea otters in the Olympic coast population. They usually start it down around Tillamook Head, just south of the Columbia River. So it's not uncommon that one of those will detach and drift off to the south.
Super. Rita asks, what about northern and southern eating habits? Are they not different?
They are not different. In fact, the biggest difference in eating habits is what the mother teaches the pup. You might say it's almost a guild type thing, where if the mom prefers clams and, say, sea cucumbers, that's what she's going to teach her pup. That's what the pup will learn. If the mom prefers crabs and the occasional octopus, that's what the pup will learn. So, and there actually is a differentiation between individuals or among individuals for diet, and it's not really a geographic thing, it's more the personal preference.
Mm-hmm. Margaret asked, hi Margaret, how are you? Once a population reaches 200, is the population expected to continue to increase?
Yes, when we picked 200, everybody on the science team agreed that if you had 200 animals at the end of 25 years, you're well on your way to a sustainable population, and you could expect them to continue to grow. So yeah, we just picked that as a target to say, hey, that's the threshold to sustainability. What would it take to get there?
Okay, Jasper has a question.
Yes.
I believe, how do these researchers sample wild sea otter population for this study?
It depends. For instance, diet habits are relatively easy to study because sea otters eat on the surface. So researchers set up these giant, almost like astronomical telescopes to watch, and they know pretty much the size of an otter's paws and their face, at least on average. And so they can observe the kind of food that they're eating, whether it's a crab or a clam or mussels or a snail or whatever, and its approximate size. And from that, then they can deduce through other work how much, what the caloric intake is of these things during the day, and whether or not they are meeting their energy requirements. There's other ways. The tagging has been less than successful, partly because it's hard to tag a sea otter. Not that you can't catch them, but the deal is that if you attach a tag in any of the fur area, it opens up that area to heat loss. So you can't really tag them in the fur, and it's been difficult to find a way to tag them in their little hind flippers or their front paws that doesn't disrupt their locomotion or their food gathering. But apparently there's been some recent work on that is looking like it might be successful, that NASA's been involved with, and that's about all I know. So beyond that, I don't know.
Okay, questions are rolling in still. Philip asks, I believe that the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has a sea otter recovery plan. Is there any chance that ODFW might consider putting one together? If an endangered sea otter is in Oregon waters, is ODFW not obligated to monitor and protect it?
Yes, they are. And yes, we think there's every reason for ODFW to develop a sea otter recovery plan, and we're going to encourage that. I believe that the agency would like to do that, and with the increased funding coming through from the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund and other sources, I think we'll get there. But we're certainly going to nudge them to do that, because as we start down the road towards reintroducing these animals, we'll need to have that recovery plan to guide post-release management of these animals.
Super. Grant asked a great question. You mentioned that the Alliance has picked their spots to reintroduce otters, mainly on the Southern Oregon coast. What is going to keep them there in their picked spots? What keeps them from moving to Northern California?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
An invisible fence line.
Yes, exactly. One of those little shock collars thing.
Just kidding, everyone.
No, that's really one of the things. Is it, we can pick a spot to reintroduce them, and we can work with the community and all that stuff. In the end, the otters are going to go where they want to go and where the habitat is. So yes, some animals may end up down off Northern California. Some animals may swim north and end up off Cape Arago or further up the coast at, Yaquina Head. But the consensus seems to be that the bulk of the animals will stay near where the release site is, but not all of them. And you really can't predict where they're going to go, especially with such changing ocean conditions as we've got now. So they'll have a mind of their own, and they'll do what they want to do. We'll do the best we can to figure it out, but it's up to them.
Jasper asks, are there any sea otter GIS data sets available online yet? Great question.
I'm not sure exactly which data sets that would be, but we hope to have. In fact, we were talking with our consultants just recently about, as we're pulling together work on this sea otter, the GIS work that I mentioned. we want to make that available online so that you can go in and look at the data that is going to help determine our decisions about sea otter reintroduction. It won't be just about sea otters, but it'll be about depth and bottom characteristics and other information, presence of other marine mammals and so on. But yeah, we hope to have some sort of online interactive thing at some point.
Mhm. Yeah, this would be great projects for grad students. Wink, wink, if you're listening.
Yes.
Okay, does anybody else have any burning? Oh, here we go. Would reintroducing otters to big fishing, shell fishing ports such as Tillamook Bay change any of the regulations to these fisheries? Great question.
It might. I would just say, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that we're probably not going to reintroduce them near Tillamook Bay. That's just inviting trouble on our part because there's a fairly substantial shellfish industry in Tillamook Bay. And there are other places on the coast where that level of commercial harvest, if not recreational harvest, doesn't exist. So we'll probably choose someplace else rather than Tillamook Bay. But yes, there may be some regulatory changes made to protect sea otters when they come back.
Okay, we got another question for you, Bob. Do you anticipate providing rescue and rehab for the otters that are released?
We probably won't, but we want to make sure that those will be in place. There is an entity known as the Marine Mammal Stranding Network, which is actually a national organization, but there is an Oregon component of the Marine Mammal Stranding Network, which is located and housed over at Oregon State University Hatfield Marine Science Center. And so that's been, and we hope will continue to be sort of a first line of, if you see a stranded animal or an animal that's sick or needs help, that's who you call, is the Marine Mammal Stranding Network guy, Jim Rice, or whoever his successor will be. And then, of course, we're going to need to organize backup facilities, whether it's the aquarium or it's the Marine Life Center in Charleston or the Seaside Aquarium. We're going to need to be organizing a whole cadre of facilities to help us with the actual physical handling of animals that might strand on the beach or need help. So that's down the line, but it's definitely on our radar screen.
Sorry, I was typing to somebody. Did you say the Oregon Coast Aquarium?
I did. I
Okay,
think.
sorry. Because they're building a huge brand new rehab center. That would be great for when sea otters are reintroduced so they can go there. The Marine Mammal Center in Vancouver also does that. Yep, somebody just said. Okay, super. Any other last minute questions? Thanks for all these engaging questions. They're wonderful. We appreciate them.
Yeah, that's it. Hey.
Before 8 o'clock, hot diggity.
Yeah, look at that. I was late, but I talk fast, so here we go.
Awesome. Yeah, if you have any other questions,
Yes, from Iron Horse Brewing. Yeah, that sounds great. I'll try that tomorrow.
Feel free to email us. It's just our first names. It's either Chanel@elakha-alliance.org or Bob@elakha-alliance.org, and we're happy to answer.
I'm loving all the brews that people or the things people are drinking here. This is great. I didn't have a chance to look at the list earlier. Rose bubbles from Oregon.
We have another question, Bob.
Okay.
Before we get too excited. The statement was made that reintroduction will have winners and losers. Who are the winners? Tourists, and who are the losers? Are they commercial fishermen?
Yeah, I mean, generally that's true. It's likely to be the tourism, travel, outdoor recreation sector that will benefit in a big way. We're right now in discussions to try to put together a study of the potential for that benefit on the South Coast. The likely losers direct harvest impacts are likely to be some of the crabbers and urchin divers in the area where sea otters come back. Not the fin fishers, not sea otters don't eat finfish. In fact, fin fishers, bottom fish, rockfish, groundfish are likely to benefit because of the improvement and increase in kelp ecosystem productivity. So that's one of the things that we're looking at is, and that's difficult to measure, but it stands to reason that if kelp forests come back and you have all these finfish that rely on kelp forests as the basis of their survival, it's going to benefit them. But it's the shellfishers that are likely to be affected. And more specifically, it's likely to be the shellfishers very locally where these animals are. If they're not released near Newport, they're not going to be eating Newport or crab in the continental shelf off Newport or off Coos Bay or off Astoria. So it's going to be fairly localized. We've had some discussions with some crab fishermen down in the Port Orford area, and they fish in different areas, and the depth which they crab is at the outer edges of where sea otters dive. So for some of them, it's not going to be a big deal. For those who crab, as they say, on the beach or in the very shallow water, it might be a problem. But as one of the guys said, we deal with lots of stuff. So sea otters would just be one more thing to deal with. So we'll see.
Perfect. Let's see. Is there no way to keep the otters in the reintroduction areas? And how will the commercial harvest loss be localized?
Say that again.
I know, sorry. If there's no way to keep the otters in the areas that they're reintroduced, how will the commercial harvest loss be localized?
Well, again, it's, sea otters only dive up to a certain depth. Yes, they can dive to 80 or 90 feet, but they're interested in getting their food easily and efficiently. So typically they dive up to 30 or 40 feet. That's fairly shallow for most crabbers to bring their boats, especially in a rocky area. They're not going to bring it in there. So we think that if you really drill down on where sea otters are actually going to live, there's going to be very little overlap between sea otters and commercial crab harvesting. Sea urchins is a different story. That's something Frank is going to be working on. There may be some ways to create some equity between the winners and losers in these communities, that there may be some way of funding those who take it in the shorts with loss of fisheries in the urchin dive or crabbing industry. But we think that's going to be relatively small given the depth that sea otters typically go and the depth where crabbers typically harvest.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. Sally asks, won't sea otters help to regain the ecological balance so there would eventually be shellfish fishery improvement as well as the return of more kelp beds?
That is exactly the idea. Yes, that has been the experience elsewhere, that sea otters are they create, it won't happen overnight, but they, over the long term, will create the fundamental conditions for a healthy, thriving, robust, diverse, resilient nearshore ecosystem. And it's the sort of thing where, as I said at the beginning, the absence of sea otters was not really understood or appreciated for decades and decades. And so nobody really realized that what was being observed by the emerging marine science along the West Coast in the 40s and 50s and into the 1960s had no idea that was less than optimum, that was not a native condition. That people didn't realize that the abundance of abalone in California or the abundance of red sea urchins in Northern California and Oregon was the result of no sea otters. So bringing back sea otters is going to rebuild an ecosystem that has been depauperate, as I guess is the word, for a century or more. And we think that that's ultimately the only way that we can have sustainable fisheries, is to have this ecosystem as healthy as possible and as productive as possible.
Okay, we've got one more before we leave. Are there studies planned to address the biggest health threats to otters, such as toxoplasmosis in the southern sea otter population? Are there any public awareness messaging for feral cats, runoff, etc.?
Good question. That's at a level that, yes, at some point we're going to need to get into that. Part of it is that we're the region that we're really looking at, sea otters down on Oregon southern coast, is not nearly as populated as the areas in California's central coast where many of these animals live. But that's exactly the kind of messages that we're going to have to build some capacity to deliver, to educate people about what is going into this nearshore environment and how it can affect sea otters. Because yes, toxoplasmosis is a real thing. Domoic acid is a real thing. There's a number of land-based, human-caused pollutants in water that really affect sea otters. And so this will give us one more reason to work on solutions to keep those things out of the water.
Yeah, I was going to mention too that Dr. Mike Murray in our Sea Otter Symposium last year, which you can find on our YouTube channel, discusses all the different health implications of sea otters that they're going through. And he talks about that. So if you want to learn more, I would suggest checking that out. I could probably put it in the chat before we leave.
That's a really, I didn't really know much about it until Mike's chapter for the feasibility study. And wow, it was eye-opening to read it. It's a little sobering actually, but you can you can cut to the chase and watch it on the webinar that Chanel's talking about.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat for Dr. Mike there. All right. Any other questions? Did we, maybe one more? Let's see. Nope. Super. Thanks,
So keep in touch with us, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you all found this thing tonight, but I'm glad you did. And keep in touch with us. Follow Chanel's work with social media. We're going to do our best. So here we go. And you're part of the team.
Yes. Thanks. Thanks, Philip, for sharing. You found us on Facebook. Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, enjoy the rest of your week, everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And bottoms up to you all.